Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the latest episode of Hawkeye, Echoes. And I really enjoyed this episode. They were able to do a good amount of things in this one episode, introduce us to Echo the character, and a pretty effective thing, give her pretty much a little bit of the backstory of her, and then bringing her up to speed of what her stake is in this game with what's going on in the present, getting us out of the kind of crazy situation that we last left Clint and Kate in, and then pretty much trying to move the plot a little bit forward. Now, granted, it doesn't go completely forward because we have a giant action scene that takes up most of the bulk of the episode, and then pretty much leaving us on a cliffhanger. So even though those problems are present, I pretty much enjoyed it to the point where I'm like, shit, when we get to the kind of cliffhanger, I'm like, yep, that's the time, because it just flew by so well. So we start off and we actually are back in 2007, and we see this little girl who's in the classroom, and they do a very effective job of bringing us into her world because she's deaf. And we at first see and kind of hear this stuff going on around this classroom full of kids, see the teacher trying to teach, but she's deaf, so that kind of has repercussions because the teacher's not... There's all different kinds of students around, and she's not really doing sign language, though we do see that Maya's ability to read lips does pop up. At this point, she's not very well versed in that, as she is trying to catch snippets from her mouth as she's trying to talk to the class when she does turn around and talks to them, and we see her being able to do the work and everything and go through it. And the teacher does come up to her trying to bring up the interpreter and everything, but she sees that she was able to turn to the correct page and fill in all the words. I'm like, okay, you good. We then shift over and see that the father is talking to her, talking about dragons and stuff like that, and it's really kind of cool. Hey, are there any dragons here? It's no, not really. They're where their home is. What if they were able to come here? They'd be very strong indeed. Before she starts bringing up, didn't we have? You said we had the money to go to this school for the deaf kids, and he's like, I'm sorry, we didn't. And the thing is, then you start noticing that he's got the tracksuit on, so he's evidently in that kind of tracksuit mafia thing. It's okay, well, we kind of see that later on as we then shift and we see her doing karate and getting into those skills. And he's like, okay, you're going to have to really be careful and watch for things. And this really helps kind of set up her kind of skill set, because we see that this one kid has this kind of move that he's able to kind of take these people down. And then we see her come up and we see that not only is she deaf, she also has a prosthetic leg. But that doesn't deter her, because she's kind of seen his moveset, kind of similar to Taskmaster, and is able to just take him down. And we are also introduced that she has this quote unquote uncle that is part of this kind of structure for this kind of gang thing, and we see that it kind of has something to do with potentially Kingpin because of the couplings. Now granted, I haven't watched the Netflix ones all the way except for Punisher, so I'm okay, we'll have to see how that kind of works out. And he's trying his best for his daughter. Well, then we go pretty much in the future and we see her more close to the Maya that we've seen in Hawkeye. And she's kicking this one dude's ass, pretty much just showing us in a very good and effective way, with a pretty decent action scene that's not really overwrought or anything, but just to show us her skills at this point in her life, which she is not someone you really want to fuck with. They do a very good job of showing different kind of abilities for people of, okay, she's deaf, but that doesn't, and she has a prosthetic leg, but that does not stop her from kicking your ass. And even if you go in and you know these things, you still better be careful. So I do like that we're seeing all these different kind of characters like this and presented in pretty effective and cool ways. So she's able to take him down, and we see that she kind of is going back to whatever base of operations that they're in. And then we see, of course, this is set during the period between like Infinity War, at the end of Infinity War and Endgame, because we see that Ronan is like repping through the tracksuit mafia. And the thing is, Maya's dad is in there, and he gets hit. And Ronan has already gotten out of the building and everything, and he's like, listen, it's too late for me. You need to get out of here. And she, of course, is like, no, that's her father. And we also get his bloody handprint on her, which is kind of her an homage to the comics, because she usually has like a handprint and everything on her face. And this, of course, has set her up to this point in her life to track down Ronan for revenge using the tracksuit mafia. So now we've got her kind of story, which is pretty much just the beginning and doesn't really take up a lot of time. It's really effective. It's a really good kind of case of being like, all right, we do need information on this character. What are the important bits? We set up kind of a pivotal kind of moment from her youth, kind of showcase her skills in the beginning, so that way it just doesn't pop up out of nowhere that she knows how to kick somebody's ass, and then showing her biggest kind of connection to what's going on at this point with Ronan. I'm like, that's how you do it. So now we're back in business doing all this kind of stuff, and we see that Clint and Kate's there, and Clint's like, listen, I was pretty much trying to tell them that you're not Ronan before you came in and kind of ruined the whole thing. And she's like, I'm sorry. No, she's like still trying to show that she came here and that she was doing something kind of good. She's like, yeah, I kind of messed up. But then we see that like one of the other tracksuit mafia people are like walking around and be like, my girlfriend's pissed because I got the Imagine Dragons tickets. She's like, well, yeah, I mean, they're Imagine Dragons tickets. She's going to take her other friend or what? And like, no, but I like them. It's like, oh, okay, so you did a miscommunication kind of thing. And the thing is, the whole kind of theme of this episode is communication. And it's kind of cool. It's not like over, like, beating you over the head with it. It's just, we get into situations that you really need to be able to communicate certain things. And she's able to kind of help them a little bit, but then, of course, Maya comes out and starts to interrogate them. She then sees that Clint's got the hearing aid, and is like, yeah, you rely on tech too much, and tries to interrogate him about what's going on with Ronan, and he's like, hey, Ronan's dead. Black Widow killed him, and now she's dead. And she's like, that's not good enough for me. She's still bent on the vengeance path. And the thing is, it's the truth. Because Nat was able to give that kind of spark of hope, and in essence did help to kill Clint's Ronin persona, and kind of bring him back and help him back in the fold to not do those kinds of things. And I do like the kind of example of the cycle of violence and everything, because Thanos did his snap, and he thought it was doing it fairly and dispassionately, and the thing is, Clint lost his whole family, and family is very important to him. And then he sees that these gangsters and what he would consider bad people are still alive, and he can't tolerate that, and decides to then become Ronin and kill them to balance it out. However, there are also these, yes, they are bad guys doing bad things, but they also have families as well. And when you start just murdering people as well, they're going to kind of take that shit personally and be like, you killed my dad. So you have to think these things through, because here are the consequences of Clint's actions. Well, he's giving him that, and she's like, screw this noise. They did untie Clint at one point to kind of let him be able to use sign language to communicate, but they weren't getting much out of him, so they like did him back up. Kate's like, all right, kind of, what's the plan? He's like, just keep an eye out. He's able to kind of get out, and we have this like chase sequence. Oh, and the kind of thing that I kind of really liked was that they're doing this in an abandoned K&B toys warehouse, and well, department store, which there was one near me when I was growing up, and I'm like, hey, I kind of interesting. Thank you for that little thing. But he's like going through. He doesn't have his hearing aid, so he's got to do this kind of differently. Going around, he's able to kind of like mess with him and like throw fucking shelves on him. But then he gets into it with Maya, and of course that's where she kind of brings up the whole tech thing, smashes his hearing aid, and they start duking it out. But the thing is, she's a competent fighter, and Clint's a little bit on the back foot, and he's kind of getting knocked around a little bit. More like, not completely getting his ass handed to him where it's like, holy fucking shit, I can't believe he survived that. More like a John McClane of like, this person's got the upper hand on me. I'm getting a little bit hurt, but I got this. As they're like chasing through, he's able to get a hold of his bow and arrows. Granted, he wasn't able to get Kate's right off the bat. But he's also able to be like, hey, watch out for this. And then he's able to shoot off her restraints, and she's able to like knock some people out too. And Kate gets some good kind of shot moments in here. Hers mainly comes in the chase sequence as they're leaving this place. So we see Clint kind of getting him through. Having his bow and arrow kind of really helps out and helps his fighting style, because he's able to get better hits in on Maya as they then go out. And it's interesting because without his hearing aid, he can get some things, but he's like, okay, let's do this. She's like, wait a minute, let's go for this one. And he's like, we're not smashing a 72 Challenger. And I'm like, damn it, you really, like, I'm with you, Hawkeye. But the thing is, though I understand you're like, we're trying to escape here and it's going to get totaled. No, I'd be like, yeah, I'm with you there. So he's pretty much hotwiring this thing, and he's trying to tell her that she's going to need to drive because he doesn't have his hearing aid. But she's like, listen, I don't know how to drive either. And they're, of course, coming in and like, fine, fuck, whatever. So she's pretty much utilizing his bow and arrows, and we're down to pretty much trick arrows now. And we get a nice car chase sequence. And it does not go overly long. They are actually able to switch up camera angles in ways that it's not complete insanity jump cuts. It's very kind of clear, kind of like the K&B Toys fight that we had as well, and that you can understand where the action's going and the techniques that people are using. And here, it's not like really super fast motion that you can't see or understand, and just like close-ups on faces. You're actually seeing different kind of cars and everything, and I think they did pretty well. Granted, there were some kind of wonky moments with like CGI for certain things, because like, that'd be a little bit difficult. Watch out. So we see they're trying to communicate, but it's not going over too well. He does get the kind of gist. He's just a little bit behind, like a couple seconds or whatnot. It's like, just use those. Not that one, not that one, not that one. Use that one. And she uses this kind of like putty one that like mooshes over the one windshield on one of them. It's like, yeah, use the putty one on the tires. It's like, damn it. It's that kind of frustration that like works out to like, okay, they're kind of getting into it. Kate really hasn't had much training with the trick arrows, so learning on the fly like this is pretty kind of cool. She then blows up one of them, which is like, holy fucking shit. As they're kind of getting around, they're also able to then kind of like get through this like Christmas tree one using the spider one, which was really fucking nuts. She like shoots it at the place. It like splats out Spider-Man kind of style, and then brings all these Christmas trees to him. He's like, whatever this, and like, sorry Santa. Driving over the Santa Claus. They kind of get through there and get on the bridge, and of course Maya and the Imagine Dragons lackey are trying to get at him. Kate's able to get her bow and arrow back, her bow back, and they kind of smash up the car a little bit. It's like, oh my god. And he's like, we didn't even take it, and it ended up totaled. I'm like, Clint, I feel you, man. Well, then they're down to like, well, they also use this one suction tip arrow that Kate was like, she had shot it onto the Challenger, and she's like, that one fucking sucks. I don't know why you'd use it. He's like, listen, I need you to shoot the USB one at him so he can get that one back. And she's like, you really need like a dongle one or whatnot. And it would be like, she's thinking it's kind of a useless one, but it's funny because Clint used it in Avengers to take down a helicarrier. So It's mainly the situation, Kate. Granted, she hasn't been in the situation to use that thing, except to, like, distract him. And he gets it back, and he's like, alright, listen, I need you to arc this regular arrow up there, and then I'm gonna hit it. It's like, what the fuck is he gonna do? And he's got a pin one. It's like, ah, shit, he gonna make a big arrow, isn't he? And he hits it and makes this giant fucking arrow, and it smashes into the bridge, and I'm like, that was cool, and that was awesome, and that's a pretty good trick arrow using pin particles like that. But they're able to escape, pretty much flying off the edge, swinging under, and pretty much suction cupping themselves onto a train. And she's like, now I know why you'd use the plunger arrow. Yes, Kate. And I'm just thinking, there's a giant arrow sticking out of a New York City bridge, and people are I could just see that on the news. Traffic was snarled up on the bridge today when a giant fucking arrow was like a giant spear from the gods in a bridge. Ice cream downtown in Central Park, news at 10. Whoosh. And it's just like, oh god, it's nuts. That cleanup would be a fucking mess. In the car, man. So, they're just sitting on the train, and Kate's trying to communicate with them, but of course, no hearing aid. And it's like, yeah, we gotta walk the dog and everything's like, alright, cool. And they get back home, well, to Kate's kind of safe house with the ant thing, and he's like icing himself, and he sees that his phone's calling, and he thinks it's his wife, and he's trying to communicate with her, but he can't hear. So Kate kind of helps writing everything out, and this was an emotionally kind of effective one because it showcased he needed help communicating with his kid, because it was his kid Nathaniel, because he thought it was the mom. It's like, oh yeah, sorry buddy, and he's asking if he'd be able to make it home for the movie marathon. He's like, yeah, no, it's gonna be another day or two. And it's really effective because you see Clint trying to like talk his kid into be like, I'm sorry, and he wanted this to be a great Christmas for him, and he can fucking see it in his face, and it's fucking hurts. And then you kind of see Kate realizing, okay, yes, I was trying to figure out, like, shit that was going on with my mom, but I really made a fucking mess for my hero. And she's trying to, like, help him communicate with the kid. And, like, yeah. And he said that, like, it's okay if you won't be home for Christmas. And it's like, I'm gonna be home for Christmas. It's like, I hope, man. And it's just like, shit, seeing him try to do this communication just worked very well character-wise for all three of the characters, actually. And you're like, well, there's a third character, Nathan, because, Nathaniel. He wants to have his dad back, and I mean, if you're racking this out, the kid has been gone for 5 years, and he's only been back for like about 2, because this is in 2025, and you're just like, yeah, Clint wants to be with his family pretty much all the time, so him being retired at the end of this would make a lot of sense, even if he would be like a trainer and would pop out to like kick some ass because he needs to. But you really see Kate kind of, even without saying it, kind of understand what's kind of going on. Then they also go out and they're able to find this kind of shop to get his hearing aid repaired. They go out to eat, and she's like working him up and everything like that, trying to tell him like what's wrong with his branding and all that. And even though he's got it, he's back to the damn spot where he'd be like, yeah, I'm going to leave this out for this. And like, yeah. It's like, listen, we got to work on your branding. Bringing up the idea of the original Hawkeye costume with the H and everything, and it's flamboyant. He's like, 1, no. 2, my wife would divorce me, and no. And it's just great. He's like, all right, we have to figure out what's kind of going on. What's with the tracksuit mafia? He brought up that he had taken on like their supplier and everything like that, and them squeezing them from kind of both sides at once. So they got to try and figure out kind of connections, what's kind of going on with them. Why would they be stealing Avengers tech? And if that is a security breach, they need to figure that shit out. So yes. And another important bit that we get kind of tangentially with this is that Maya is getting called out by pretty much her second in command, being like, listen, Your father ran this shit. The crew came first. You're doing this. You're not putting the crew first. She's like, I'm in charge. I'm doing this. And he's like, you better be careful because Uncle probably isn't going to like this. And we're like, can't wait to see kind of who this shadowy figure is and what's going to be going on with that. Well, he's like, fine. She's like, hey, we can sneak into my mom's penthouse and get info that way from Bishop Securities. Because she's still trying to also figure out how Jack Duquesne kind of fits into this as well and trying to figure out what he's hiding. Because he's there buying Avengers shit. Now, granted, he's mainly probably there for Ronan's sword. But if he's kind of connected with this underworld group, that does not bode well for Bishop Securities. So, Hawkeye pretty much gets ready to get out. We see her talking with the dog. He's like, alright, what are you going through all these names on the pizza dog? And the dog's like, he's like, alright, cool. Gives him some bacon. They kind of walk out. And then we shift over and we see that they do get into the apartment and all the penthouse. And he's like, Jesus. This place is huge. She's like, yep. And he's like, I'm in the wrong line of work. And she gets into the laptop first and tries to look up pretty much the second in command. Doesn't really get much information before pretty much getting locked out. Hawkeye is able to hear some things in the apartment. Is kind of suspicious. The dog's pretty much wandering throughout. But he heard some stuff, walks into pretty much the kind of dining room area before he has his sword placed across him threateningly by Jack. That is Ronan's sword. And that's where the episode ends. So, we didn't get much movement plot-wise. We mainly were just introduced that the whole Tracksuit Mafia is evidently used for smash and grab to get Avengers tech, but their person that pretty much is leading them at the moment also has a revenge vendetta against Ronan, which has kind of spun out this whole thing. So my only kind of quibble would be that there wasn't as much movement plot-wise, which is a problem because now we are halfway through this miniseries. So they kind of have to like pack things up. Like you have to have that balance of like, okay, really cool action scenes and also plot development, especially when you only have 6 episodes. And the thing is, I understand that the front episode had to have the information that we got to understand Maya's placement, Echo's placement within this and what her vendetta thing is against Ronan. And we've got a whole other kind of bunch of like things that need to be kind of worked out because I'm pretty sure Yelena will be popping up at some point to deal with what's going on because the Contessa pretty much pinned Black Widow's death on Hawkeye, Clint. So seeing like things like this going on around New York was going to bring her in, and hopefully they're able to insert her well enough that it's like we don't need a lot of stuff to get her up to speed and interacting within the framework of the plot. It's like, okay, people are going after Avengers tech, and we're already 3 episodes in, and we are not really that much closer to that. So that is a problem, and it needs to be rectified. So even though I enjoyed this, and I like the action, and I like the character moments, the plot needs to go a little bit faster. I don't like just a little bit. I'm not talking about that you have to fucking, like, ludicrous speed that shit. It's just we need momentum and movement every episode when you've got 6. Alright? And here it kind of lulled until we've got, like, Jack doing his shit that's going to be proving, he's kind of acting a little bit suspect. A little bit sus doing that whole sword thing. So we'll have to see how that kind of shakes out in the last 3 episodes. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.